So we've actually fitted new hinges, which we did in a previous episode. Now these are the traditional, the old style hinges, so they still go on in the same way as a normal hinge, but if you want to see that video, just scroll back a few on the playlist and you'll see how we actually got these fitted. Now fitting the door itself is a really easy job, or I should say getting it mounted onto the hinges is a really easy job. It's just simply a case of putting the bolts through the door and buttoning them up at the back. There's a little trick to getting things lined up, and you have that with all doors. And you just got to remember to leave your hinges slightly loose on the bulkhead or on the B-pillar, so that when you've got everything shut, you can actually get it all lined up. So what I made the decision to do was fit a Series 2 door, which is actually a non-anti-burst. So let me just quickly go back on that. Anti-burst doors featured on Series 3 and the very early 110 Defenders. And what they actually had is an additional hole here for a lock, and it's a 2-stage mechanism. Now, I didn't want that just because they're a little bit difficult to get mounted on these in my experience. And these older latches, which is just quite simply a really basic latch, no key, no lock involved, are a much simpler way of getting the doors closed. And what I wanted to do was actually do a remote deadlock system on these, so like a hidden deadlock system on the inside to actually lock the doors. So just trying to keep all the lines really clean. They're made to the exact same spec as they were out of the Land Rover factory, so all the rivets are in the same place, the skin is actually the same thickness, and the frame is built to the same spec. Now when we go to actually finish these doors and get them painted, they're going to be primed, they're going to be painted with Raptor to match the interior on the inside, so that'll give it some sound deadening. Then we're going to be adding a sheet of Dynamat before then finishing it with our own trimmed door panel, so it will all look really neat and tidy. But as I say, it's just really important to get a galvanised frame, because obviously water is going to be ingressing all through here and into this lower channel. So you have got drain holes in the bottom here, so even if you do get some water in there, they're going to drain out. We're going to actually put some cavity wax in there anyway, because we really want this vehicle to last as long as possible. So as far as fitting this latch, that was super easy. It's just literally an arrangement of 4 nuts and bolts. So the plates that go on, you've got a nut plate, which you should actually fit to the top, and you've got a bolted plate, which you should fit to the bottom from the outside. So once the door's actually mounted to the hinges, you can then offer it up against the bodywork. And what we used is the little crease on this B-pillar here to line up our door and then get our shut line correct. So this really has to be your priority. So where this line comes across here, you want to make sure it lines up on the body itself and also at the front wing. And then once you've got the height correct, you can then start messing about with hinges to get everything, the shut lines correct. So here you can see we've got our striker. Now that had to be modified quite a bit because it was too deep. I'll show you the difference, look. And you can see, and I'll do a close-up of that, but actually you can see just how much meat we had to remove off the top. It doesn't matter, but we actually took a little bit off this ridge here, as well as making the top flat. There's still plenty of meat for the actual latch to go into, so that's not a problem. It's just obviously the position of this is different on our 110 than it would be on a series. So cutting this was actually quite hard work. This is a good solid piece of metal. We used a cutting disc and we trimmed it back. So now we've done that, I'm actually going to use this as a guide to give me an idea of where the next one has to be cut. So all I did, once I hung the door correctly, I then just shut the door onto my latch without bolting it in, and then I could make sure that I could position the latch in a way that the door was sitting flush. So I did that without these trims in place. Got the door to sit nicely lined up. You have got some movement on these strikers, so it's really nice to be able to get them in position, and then it just made mounting it much easier. So I've used stainless steel bolts with a spring washer, and that set everything nicely in position. And then once I got the trims on and I was shutting the door, I could make sure that the door shut against it nice and tight, and I could actually get my position, my final position for the striker in place. So I've got a couple of mil clearance there, and it just shuts nicely against that. So fitting the second row door latch was just the same as the front really, but I only had the nut plate at the top to fit, and then I just have to use nut and bolt at the bottom because this is a lot narrower. I don't believe you can get a plate that fits in here, so we didn't really need it because you can get to the nuts and bolts quite easy. But everything, the construction's all the same on this door, and the nice thing was I didn't actually have to modify the striker at all. Now, actually sourcing the door caps on these in Galv was a lot easier than I expected because historically they've only ever been available just with like an e-coat on them, just in black. So you'd have to go to the expense of having them galved yourself. But you can buy them off the shelf now, not only for the front doors, but amazingly for the second row doors as well. And they're quite simply just a capping like this. And you can see the actual profile of it matches the rear capping here. So everything's going to sort of flow through, and these are such a good fit. So you actually mount them with some rivets. We're going to put a seal on the top here from YRM. We're going to use some of their gasket seal that's going to go on there just to separate things. Now, these two big holes we've got here are for the door top to actually drop in, so we don't want to be a foam in the way there. So we're actually just going to be running the foam on this top bit here. I don't see why I shouldn't just put two little bits on the end as well, just to make sure the job's done properly. And then we just turn it around, drop it in place. That's perfect. Now, we've only got the door bottoms in place at the moment. We have to do the door tops as well. And I do need to fit the door tops before we put the frame or the cage on for the canvas, because I need the doors to sit and get all my shut lines right for the actual frame itself to make sure everything lines up nicely. So we'll be doing the door tops very soon as well. Don't have them all in yet, but when they come in, we'll crack on and do that as a whole kit.